Afternoon, everyone. Everybody enjoying the AI world so far, right? This is probably the last few sessions you guys are going to attend. So thank you for making time today. Really appreciate you guys joining us. And you know, it's interesting. You'll hear about Verisk, but also we have a large contingent of Verisk stakeholders here sitting. So we're going to make sure we do our job here properly, present the solution properly. So. First of all, my name is Vicenta Cairo. I'm a partner in KPMG Finance Transformation Practice. I lead our corporate services TMT industry, which is technology, media, and telecom. I'm based in California. So Verisk is one of our industry clients, so fantastic. You will hear a lot of good stuff today about their journey from quote to cash, from a quote to cash standpoint. So one of the things, and obviously standing next to me is Charles, who is a vice president for finance, for transformation, and kind of was in charge for leading us through this particular journey. So you'll hear quite a bit from Charles. Dimitri Levin, who is my co-partner in crime, he is part of our finance transformation practice, and he was responsible for leading this particular initiative from KPMG standpoint. And Sumit Srivastava, who is our architect, kind of the brains behind some of the solution. So please make sure you have some time with him as you think through some of the solutions. Please pick his brains. We've got pretty interesting character.
I will confirm that.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Awesome. From an agenda standpoint, pretty straightforward. We'll start off with what is Verisk? What does the company do? Some of the highlights on their business model. So Charles will share some of those metrics and what's their some of their business challenges and some of the transformation challenges they've been through. So you will hear quite a bit of that. And then we'll move into the order to cash transformation. Why is it very important for Verisk to consider this transformation journey? What were the key drivers behind that, and what led to some of these initiatives to become such a critical component for the company? And then we'll definitely, like anything else, all transformation journeys, as you probably heard from other sessions, we got a lot of things we learned through the process. And you will hear from the team that what we planned for when we started this program and how we executed were a little bit different. So, and through the process, we learned quite a bit how we overcame some of those challenges, some of the things we learned through the process. We definitely would love to share that with you, so you guys could think through as you're doing your transformation journeys. And then lastly, we'll take your questions. We have a good chunk of time planned out after some of the presentation to take your questions, but please don't hesitate to raise your hand and we'll take your questions along the way too. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand this off to Charles to take us through the process here.
Excellent. So many of you may not know Verisk. I joined Verisk 2 years ago, and I came in to lead this transformation. And frankly, at the time that I first heard about this, I didn't know Verisk either. But it's really behind the scenes for the insurance industry. So we're a data and analytics company, and as you can kind of see some of these key metrics, the way that Verisk came into being was getting data from the insurance companies set up by the insurance industry, and we get information about underwriting decisions and claims that have happened. We have data sets that are absolutely enormous. You'll see there 30 petabytes of data, and we have sort of 34 billion transactions about underwriting decisions and claims, and that allows Verisk to sit behind the insurance industry and allows them to be much more capable of doing benchmarking, thinking about the policies and the terms of a policy. We do a lot of catastrophe modeling, and you may have seen, like with the wildfires, we had the first model that was accepted for fires in California. So all of that data kind of sits behind. So think of us as an enabler, a B2B business that sits behind the insurance industry. We've been around for 50 years. So it started off as a company, as I say, set up for the insurance industry. And we transitioned to being a for-profit at the back end of the 1990s. and became like a for-profit and then did an IPO. So we now have like a market cap of about $33 billion. And you can see that on like a revenue of approaching $3 billion. We've got about 8,000 employees. We are in about 19 countries today. So this scales as a business out of the US, which is where we were founded. We're still like an 80% a US company. But we can scale a lot of the activities that we have on a global basis. And along the way, one of the things that Verisk did is where we moved into adjacent industries. And so we have this kind of deep domain knowledge of data and analytics, data scientists. We have real data scientists, a lot of actuaries as well. But we expanded adjacent into finance, into energy, into sustainability. And so you kind of see during that sort of 2000 up to about 2019, 20, that expansion. And then what happened and then after that was that, we wanted to specialize back in the insurance industry. So we then undid a lot of those transactions, specialized back into the insurance industry. That's where we are now. And that's really a key driver of what are the drivers that we wanted to see as we kind of went through this journey to improve how we look after our customers. So if you kind of think about a company that grows through acquisition, so you've got your organic and you've got your inorganic piece. As we went through the process of assimilating these other countries, we never really learned how to have a predictable integration model. As a result, when it comes to kind of dealing with our customers, they're receiving the invoices from the billing unit that they used to contract with. And so as they start to think about this broad relationship that they have with Verisk, that's not representative of how we then talk to our customers, because we're giving them different invoices from different platforms with different contract terms. And our technology, which was a 26-year-old PeopleSoft environment, that kind of helped us from like the financial reporting piece, but it didn't help us in terms of how we talk to our customers and how we identified new potential business opportunities. So you had this siloed environment where a lot of manual processes, and the team here would work like late nights to pull everything together from a financial perspective, but could never really get the business, all the things that the business was looking for in terms of how they were going to then talk to their customers. Those disconnected systems we talked about, and then think about then all the reconciliation activity and the manual activity that was taken in order to get our results out. So as we thought about this as one part of a broader program, we were basically replacing our entire footprint from a financial systems perspective and from an HR systems perspective with one global integrated solution. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but you kind of think about what that then enables us to do is it allows us to build this much more repeatable process for each one of those core end-to-end processes. It also gives us that single source of truth that we all talk about in terms of, what is our revenue number? How much do we get from a customer? How does that divide between subscription revenue and transactional revenue? And one of the things that we wanted to get out of order to cash was we wanted to leverage, our SI partners' capabilities about, how do we get to a global template rather than these individual point solutions that we'd had and we'd inherited. And that then gives us that ability to have that kind of consistent revenue reporting by customer and by billing unit. So that's why we did it. Some of the things I think they kind of talk about, like metrics, this kind of aligned with our, we've talked about that broader business strategy about getting closer to our insurance customers. But what do we want to do? We want to make sure that wherever that customer is, we've got that same ability to do, present Verisk or the Verisk legal entities that they contract with in a consistent way. So on that left-hand side, rather than having all of these different billing units with their own processes, how do we get into one much more streamlined process? We talk about Verisk being a B2B business. Our big clients are the big global insurers but it actually turns out we've got like 400,000 different customers, because one of the businesses that we have is the ability to estimate a claim when there's like household damage. And so one of the sets of people who contract with us are all of the people who come and visit your house after you've had like a really bad event. And so we have about 400,000 customers. That 400,000 customers, when you kind of translate that into how that data is then represented within our customer data master, actually turns into like 24 million rows of data. So think about that from a data conversion perspective. We needed to know the customer, we needed to know the site, we needed to know the email contact, we needed to have all of the cross-references back to our legacy systems. So when we were building this program, I think we had this sort of perhaps slightly naive view at the beginning, about 400,000 rows, kind of a couple of late nights, we could kind of sort that out. When we went through that process and it started turning into 23 million rows spread across umpteen different tables at the back end of Oracle, it was like, okay, that's more than we're going to be able to do with a couple of late nights. And so Sumit can talk about some of the things that we had to do to kind of help that. We wanted to get that process variation. You kind of think about these billing units. We talk about 89 billing units. That's kind of effectively our legacy acquisitions and how they then bill their clients. We wanted to kind of consolidate that down to 5 or 6 standard templates that we use when we're sending an invoice out to the client. So you can have a different legal entity at the top of the template, because that's where your legal contract sits with, but much more standardized template that we're using there. And we kind of think about it from a financial perspective. We had several sort of, we had three types of saving that we wanted to get coming out of the broader program. One is we wanted to make sure that we got people who weren't fragmented, so we could get activities consolidated and standardized. When we think about it from a collections perspective, we did not have the tools or the capabilities to run things like dunning letters and predictive collections and the like, and we were expecting to get that from Oracle. And we thought if we could just take like 6 days out of our collection cycle, either through more timely invoicing or by more timely collections, that would free up about $100 million of working capital. And back in the times that we were really thinking about this as a program, which was in like the early 2020, interest rates were much lower. Now we're actually able, you think about putting $100 million on deposit, you're going to get 4 or 5%. If you kind of think about it from a weighted average cost of capital, that's a substantial number. And that really helps to like fund the entire program. So think about those kind of core metrics and the value that this program delivers. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Dimitri, who can talk about how KPMG helped us kind of architect and size the program.
Thank you. Thanks, Charles.
Yes.
Dimitri Levin. I'm the lead day-to-day partner on this particular program, working side by side with Charles, with Sumit, and a lot of the Verisk folks who are in this room. So I just want to give everybody here a brief appreciation of the scope, and certainly Charles, I think, has done an excellent job on what we're facing. From an Oracle perspective, right, what we implemented is subscription management, accounts receivable, advanced collections, product management, customer data management, right, for those 400,000+ customers, and Oracle revenue management to make sure when you think about the quote to cash lifecycle that we can automate that end-to-end value chain. Just to have an appreciation, right? We have 46 different interfaces that we had to integrate, 6 key conversion objects, all of the customers, right? All the open transactions, all the open revenue arrangements, et cetera. We have custom workflows and custom reports. KPMG also helped manage from a program management perspective, technical, right? How do we design? How do we build, test, deploy, make sure the conversions are working, the integrations, right? The users actually can test and get comfortable and accept the solution, as well as all of the insights, right? Reporting and insights, and that's something we'll talk about shortly, was key to the success of this project. Having a 360 view of the customer, understanding who your customers are. So having that data model redefined, and then once we went live, hypercare and ensuring we're there every step of the way, working collaboratively with the Verisk team to help transition this solution to them. And if you go on to the next, sorry. I'll say this was a true partnership, right? This wasn't, hey, KPMG has a solution, you guys adopt it. We really worked hand in hand, us, Verisk, and Oracle, and that collaboration was ultimately why we were able to succeed here. With that said, let me talk through kind of our methodology and how we approach these types of projects. And we've done quote-to-cash transformations in Oracle for a very long time. Me personally, my very first one was DocuSign, which also had a lot of volume and a lot of challenges. But so the approach that we've taken here is if you start with the current state and you say, okay, you have 89 business units and each one of them is a separate company, let's understand what you do. Let's understand then how that works in the cloud. You're never going to succeed. All right, that is just a path to failure. So what we've done at KPMG is we've invested a lot in what we call our target operating model, our powered enterprise approach. And that is, let's look at the leading practice on how you would do this in Oracle. Let's understand what is the leading practice process, functionality, capabilities, controls, and data that you would need if you were to just start from scratch and implement this solution in Oracle. And then let's work backwards. Let's challenge the BUs, let's challenge the stakeholders and say, why won't this work for you? Right? What happens if you took your 10,000 pricing rules and you did it all in Oracle, right? Maybe it won't be 10,000, maybe it'll be 1,000, but does it get you what you need to operate on a day-to-day basis? And that's ultimately what we did, right? We worked backwards from the leading practice and we challenged our client and all of our stakeholders to identify what we call deviations. It's not requirements, right? We're not asking you for your requirements. We're asking you for deviations because you're deviating from the leading practice. And let's understand why you're doing that and what are the pros and cons. And if it truly makes sense because it's unique to your business and it's how you operate, then maybe we can tailor the solution for you. But to achieve the benefits that you saw earlier, you're going to have to adopt the Oracle platform and the leading practice solution. With that said, quickly, there's 5 key phases. Number 1 is vision. And that's what Charles talked about earlier. And that is, what do we want to do? What are we trying to achieve? What are the key metrics that we're tracking? What are the guiding principles that we're going to be using? Once we have an understanding of that, we go to validate. And this is where a lot of companies call this design, right? We don't call it design. We call it validate because we're not designing. We're validating a solution. We're going to talk through it. We're going to explain the process. We'll explain the data behind it, the technology, the control environment, and the impact on your people. And then we're going to show it to you. And we're going to say, okay, why won't this work? Right? And that's what we did. Once we come out of validate, we go to construct. That's where we're now building, right? We're building the integrations. We're doing the mock conversions. We're doing the conference room pilots. And now users are getting in and getting comfortable and saying, yeah, this is great, or no, this doesn't work. We need to change this. From there, we go to deploy. The key there is going to be cutover, but more importantly, user acceptance testing, right? The broad user base across all of the different BUs, across all the stakeholders, does this solution work for you? Right? Can you operate day to day? This is the bloodline of the company, right? This is customer-facing invoices. We want to make sure they're accurate. We want to make sure they're timely and they're going out the door. So this was a very, very important project, and it was really critical for us to do thorough testing to get it right. And then we go live and we evolve, right? Evolve is hypercare, plus as new releases come out, right? Can we regression test it? Is there new functionality? How do we continuously improve? This is the approach that we took for this program, and this is what we take consistently when we do quote-to-cash transformations. Timeline, and we can talk about this together, Charles. So let me start off, right? And there's a lot here. You're probably wondering, wow, there's a lot of green, there's a lot of arrows, some red. When we started this program, December of 2023, not a great time to kick off a program right before the holiday season. But we started in December 2023, and we had a vision, right? Our vision was we're going to go live in 12 or 13 months. About 6 months in, right, we came to the realization that we're working closely together. There's so much collaboration happening, but the time commitment that is required, right, the number of validations and integrations that the BUs have to create and get comfortable with the solution, right? We're going from hundreds of templates to 6 global templates. There's a big adoption, big change management readiness aspect that we're not getting comfortable enough to go live in 12 or 13 months across all 89 BUs. So what do? We said, look, there's a lot of value in still getting subscription management, billing, CDM, and RMCS. But we're not going to decommission PeopleSoft, which is your current system. Right? We're going to use it as a pass-through. So now you're going to run both concurrently, but you're going to be on Oracle, right? You're going to get all of the insights, all that 360 customer review. You're going to get that automation on revenue, and you get a lot of capabilities that you don't have today. But what that's going to allow us to do then is take more time to sit with the business stakeholders, truly do those validations, reconciliations, and testing to get them comfortable then to decommission their current system and move entirely into Oracle. And we've broke that down into multiple waves. So as of now, right, we went live on wave 1, we went live on wave 2, we're about to go live, actually we went live on wave 3, and in a few months' time, we'll go live on wave 4. So 90% at this point, and Charles can probably correct me, of all transactions and all revenue is flowing through the new system. We've decommissioned completely any legacy architecture.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's kind of interesting on the timing there, and I think it's important, we talk about December as like not an ideal time to start. If you kind of think about that from your business partner's perspective, you know, people are doing their budgets in like September or October. They're being given what their business priorities are. And then we come along in December and go, we've got this great idea. During this next year, we want to turn off these systems that have been in place for like 26 years. And they're saying, but it took us like 5 years to do this for one business, and now you're going to do the whole thing in like a year. You're completely nuts. And I think some of the words were actually rather less polite than that. But what they hadn't done, and we hadn't really sort of assimilated and we hadn't figured out how to prioritize our internal activity, which quite clearly aligned with our broader business strategy, with what was their specific business priorities that they had. They were having to develop new models and new products for their clients, and so that was kind of the revenue growth opportunity they had. And then they're trying to fit in, you know, our sort of thing, saying, well, this is, you know, they would think, well, this is kind of more internal. We understand why we're doing it, but it's not aligned with the priorities that we've got with our business partners. And so from like an IT organization, that's why that it took us like a few months to kind of jiggle that. And this is one of those environments, because of the way that we were running the program, you know, we don't declare success until everybody's off PeopleSoft and it's got the direct interfaces coming into Oracle. But what we could do is say, well, okay, well, if we start using Oracle as that pass-through, then we can kind of de-emphasize the businesses. We can kind of partner with our businesses to say, when does it work for you, and how do we put you onto a slightly different timeline? So that what it did is it changed the way that we were working across all of these different teams to say, okay, well, you know, now that we are on your roadmap, you can get us into the roadmap for 2025, we'll spend more time working internally with PeopleSoft, which is an environment which we know very well, because that's the platform that we've been using for a large number of years. And we can really build that integration from PeopleSoft through to Oracle. And then as we go into 2025, then we can just rewire and sort of unplug the PeopleSoft part of the feed. And that's kind of where we are right now. And this weekend is the last bit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so as you can see, these programs are not perfect, right? There's always challenges along the way, and we wanted to share that with you today, and we'll talk a little bit about lessons learned shortly. But ultimately, right, we're able to adopt, we're able to think through, is there a benefit to going live on time? What are the capabilities? What value are we driving? And get to a successful outcome. I'll let Sumit here talk a little bit about what the actual architecture that we've implemented looks like.
The house. Thanks, Dimitri. Now, the devil is in the detail, right? When we started onto Verisk, right, one of the key problems we saw was how do we integrate 89 different billing units into a single system, which is going to serve as central finance for complete Verisk, right? So what you see here is a reference architecture. It was very complex, so we tried putting it into a much simpler way. The top part represented the number of BUs, what it is. Right. So you see, they are like Salesforce or the modern system, and then they had a legacy system, which were like not capable of sending the APIs. That's where our pillar come up with API and Apache integration, right? So the OIC layer we built it, right? That takes care of our orchestration, that took care of all the error handling, and they took care of all the data enrichment, what is required to integrate the legacy system with the Oracle. The second pillar, CDM. Now there was another complexity out there. One was 400K customers. How do you maintain those customers, right? At the same time, you have to make sure the customer details are not exposed to all the billing units because they care a lot about their own customer and the verticals, right? And that's where the CDM design comes in play. We spent a quite considerable amount of time in designing the CDM, how the data enrichment will work, and how this data will feed into a different system, what it interacts with. Now, subscription management came as a very handy tool for us. So subscription management and the AR part, right? They are the one which interacts directly with the BU system. So let it be moving into a subscription side, right? They wanted to move from complete transactional business to a subscription business model. There were some billing units who wanted to go into AR side. I will bill for my own, right? But at the same time, I want the corporate billing to recognize the revenue. Right? And that's where we have modeled subscription and the receivable in a way that it interacts through the orchestration. Even it's worth mentioning about the pricing, the complexity, right? Even though it doesn't make up the big part of the revenue, but it was way complex. So we had to start with the standardization process, right? We took contracts, literal paper contract from the BUs. We looked through that, right? We standardized, we classified it into what's the baseline, right? What do you have to follow, right? Is it a usage or is it a commitment orders, right? We have bifurcated each and every unit. We created a rules. It was not a lift and shift from PeopleSoft, but more of a transformation. Take the contract, derive the process, figure out the technology, what is required to enable. And that's where we used Oracle PIM to standardize everything. So as of today, as Charles mentioned, right, we are on the last leg of go live. So we have already done wave 3, which is majority of the revenue, almost 90% of the revenue which is coming through. And the 10% we are going live by this quarter and the Q1 of January. Coming back to the reference architecture, what you see, there are two different pillars, what we say, right? One which enables Verisk, right, which is API and the data orchestrations, right? The other side, reporting analytics. Now, why I'm emphasizing on these two? Because for the corporate billing, right, they to serve as a very important mechanism to serve their customer, right? When I say their customer, the 89 billing units, they're actually a customer of corporate finance. So they look after all the reports. So I need a report which represents my billing unit, right? How do I represent my customer? I mean, accounting by customer, revenue by customer. So all these things we had to think through, emphasize on the security part, right? How the segregation of duty will work and how we will present the data in a way which can be easily consumable by the BUs. And that's where another layer comes in play, which is Oracle infrastructure. We had to build some bolt-on application to serve the purpose because not everything was possible, and looking at the complexity, we did have to build those. And with this, we connected all together with the BUs serving their pricing. We are serving their invoices. Even we are providing an output to the end customer. So now Oracle has become a source of truth for the invoicing part, for the revenue part, and for the reporting. I think that's all I have to share, and I'll pass it to Dimitri to take it forward. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Sumit. Charles, let's do this together.
Absolutely.
This is, I'll let you start and I'll jump in.
Yeah, so
What have we learned?
Yeah, so kind of like I quite often go back to this kind of like top 10 things that we've learned along the way. And so we kind of think about it as like, what's number one? It's kind of like, what's the end user experience going to be once we've gone live? And so, we were very deliberate about how we were going to do our training, how we were going to get validation, and I think at the back of the room, how we're going to evolve the solution to actually get to the things that we thought we were going to promise when we first went live. So, we've really taken the end users along on the journey, and we kind of, we won't declare success. We'll declare success in one way technically once we turn off PeopleSoft. But we won't actually declare success until we've met all of the metrics, including how the users feel about the solution. And right now, that's still a work in progress. So that's on our evolution path. As we kind of think about keeping ourselves on track, this kind of data and tooling and automation is really a key part. And I think we probably kind of alluded to it before. We kind of underestimated that. We kind of went in thinking it's 400,000 customers. It's not 400,000 customers by the time you get it into CDM. It's at 23. How do you make sure that when we're in this kind of hybrid PeopleSoft environment, you saw these kind of waves coming in, how do we kind of keep some business units still going to PeopleSoft and the new ones going direct to Oracle? So this kind of data and tooling and automation is kind of something which we have to keep a very active eye on. We do a really nice job there. And I think a couple of the other things that I'm very proud of, you see kind of down there, is formalize the go, no-go criteria. So this is one part of a much broader program, and the whole program was executing in 15 months. So at the same time as we're doing this, we're also doing a GL conversion, a procure-to-pay conversion, an HR conversion, a payroll conversion, setting up a shared services center. So this was like one part. One of the reasons that we kind of work with KPMG specifically on this area is like the one thing that the two things you can't get wrong. You can't get your customer wrong. That would be like really bad. You get your payroll wrong. Frankly, that's even worse. So, when we went live on January 1, the first payroll ran January the 6th. So you're trying to keep these two programs, two SIs that we were using, kind of working in parallel, because at the end of the day, it all comes together in the production environment. But we were very formalized, therefore, in kind of what was our go, no-go criteria. And then at each step of the way, you saw those kind of 5 pillars that Dimitri has. We would have like go, no-go criteria along each one of those. So at the point that we'd done our conference through pilots, what did we expect to see? What did we actually see? And you clearly don't get to 100%, but what you're seeing as your delta, is that something you can carry forward, or do you need to think about how you're going to kind of redesign the program? So we were very, very diligent on that, and we were very diligent at the top on the governance program and sharing with our stakeholders and our sponsors being the CFO, the CHRO, and our CIO. So we had a very robust process where we would get the reports in from a project perspective, the reports coming in from a program perspective, and then our outreach back to the sponsors about how we're doing in total. But that's it's kind of lessons learned. I know, Dimitri, you've got a few lessons learned from KPMG perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll add a few, right? Yeah. Some of them are probably not on this slide, and I'm happy to talk after. When you're executing a program across 19 different countries and thousands of different employees and stakeholder groups, it gets really tricky when you do user acceptance testing or you do any type of testing. What we found was people were raising issues, and sometimes it's a real issue, sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes it's a training problem. So what we did at Verisk that I thought really worked really well is we set up war rooms during testing. Huge, old school, right? Even though we delivered half virtually, half on site, we set up war rooms. People flew in from all over the country, from all over Europe, to sit in one room with KPMG, right? Side by side, as we executed the different test scripts, as we went through that end-to-end process. And that helped us save a lot, right? Because if there's a problem that happened, You don't have to go through the whole cycle of let me raise a ticket, let me prioritize it, let me figure out what it is. And no, we can do it live. We can do it right away, right? You raise your hand, someone comes over. So that was one huge lesson learned, especially for key milestones. Be in the same room, be at the same time zone, and it helped us accelerate quite a bit. The other thing, I think, Charles, you mentioned on data, and that was a big one for us in terms of, a lesson learned is data early on. As much as we can, let's start thinking about data right from the get-go. Because it was really 24 million plus line items, right? And we went through a lot of different iterations and validations. 3, have a calendar of everyone's PTO. Where are they going to be? Where are they going to work? Yeah, because it's like, hey, wait a minute. I have a ski trip during CRP2. I can't be here for the next 2 weeks. Fantastic. But we have 100 plus KPMGers and another 100 plus Verisk folks that are dependent on getting this done. So have really good visibility into that, right? Along the way. I understand, it's hard to plan, but you got to do the best you can do.
I think I would call out here that Dimitri made it quite clear that he was going to get married during the project.
And have a baby.
And have a baby. And that was like more than 9 months after the marriage. So we did actually give him enough time, I think, to get married and now obviously look after young Levin that has come along.
Thank you. Other things I'll say is, there's a big change element to this program, to every program, anytime you execute it. And I know sometimes we talk about it and everyone kind of agrees, and then it becomes an afterthought, and people try to learn the system, learn the solution as part of the testing. And that's often what happens. But the more you can hit it up front, the more you engage the stakeholders as part of the design and truly have them get an appreciation of what we're trying to achieve and what we're building and really take ownership of it, as opposed to being a recipient where somebody's pushing the solution on you, the better off you're going to be later on, right? In terms of not just going live, but getting some of those outcomes that you're looking for, right? It's like someone hands you a key to a Ferrari, but you don't actually know how to operate it. So that is going to be fundamental. It was key here, right? That's one of the issues that pushed our timeline slightly. And it's also something that we're seeing, right? With every release, every wave, we're getting optimization. We're getting some of that automation and some of the, the DSO benefits. It wasn't like that the first day we went live, right? It took about a quarter for us to close the books faster, for us to realize, wait a minute, people are actually leveraging the system, the solution, right, that we've built. It's not something that we saw on day one. And I know it's not up here, but I did want to share that because I think it's a really important point. All right, with that said, I want to open it up to questions.
Oh, I think there's one more slide. Yeah, there's one more.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Charles, future ahead. Forgot. This is very important.
Yeah, so one of the things that you kind of think about one of these programs. We're very fortunate to have our SI. And one of the things that we didn't have on the lessons learned, so you might want to have some contingency funding floating around. But you've got to keep. There's going to come a point at which we have to become self-sufficient, and so we've talked a lot about 89 BUs. We didn't actually do all 89 BUs. We did the BUs that are fully integrated into our environment. That is the vast majority of our revenue. We gave some numbers there. But we have to now learn to be self-sufficient. So all of those solutions that we've been given by Sumit and by the KPMG team, we're the ones who are going to have to iterate that going forward. So as we kind of move into 2026, we really have to learn how to do the rest of the journey, more without that sort of support from our SIs. And so, we think about the sort of the future phases into 2026. It will be learning how to take those legacy companies that weren't integrated into PeopleSoft and bring them into our new Oracle environment. We're also continuing to be acquisitive, and so we want to have an integration roadmap that now leverages that core capabilities. And so as we go now with new acquisitions, we did one about 5 or 6 months ago, we had that business fully integrated into the new platform in 3 months. And so if you think about our legacy where we didn't do those integrations, these new integrations are going to happen. Now that was a very small company. I'm not going to say, it was a small offshoot of a company actually. But now we've got a medium-sized one and a larger one coming. So we're starting to really exercise that repeatable playbook of integration. And so that's another reason why we need to be kind of self-sufficient. And then we think about everything you're hearing over the next few days, the last few days about where we are with AI adoption. You kind of think about that from an order to cash perspective. You'll see a lot of, if you go wandering around the floors, how do you get more predictive about what is the next best action for getting your cash in earlier? How can you start to learn the system about what our cash flow is going to look like? So we know that's a capability. So you kind of have that AI-driven predictive way of categorizing your customers and making the calls that are going to bring that money in early. So that's a big driver for us. And that will then tie into that business case realization around the 6 days. The 6 days don't come from a lack of they're not just going to arrive. We have to really lean in on it and think about how we're going to use these new tools and capabilities. And then we just think, keep on now that people are using the system. After about 6 months, people start to get an idea of when you said this was the solution, this is really what we want to have happen going forward. So starting to now get much more innovation coming to us from the users of the platform about how we can improve our solution. So we've got an active roadmap that goes now through 2026. And we're pretty excited about all the new capabilities that Oracle will be deploying as we kind of go down the path. And that'll give us the rest of 26 and going into 2027. So that is the kind of the future. So with that, we can kind of take some questions, and we'll leave up some sort of ideas of kind of metrics that we want to get in terms of value, and those are things which you can kind of take on as you're trying to make the case for your own journeys. But take some questions.
Awesome. All right. Any questions? Anything you want us to clarify? Yeah.
Question regarding the reconciliation on your previous slide. You were talking about how it helps on the reconciliation for the cash. Does that automatically integrate to the banks? Say I have an integration from the bank into the cash management.
Mm-hmm.
Does it go to that level where I can go back to where the integration is coming from?
Yeah, so if you look down this bottom layer in terms of external systems, so you can see some of the linkages we've got. So if you kind of think about it from a US perspective, you've got lockboxes. And so those lockboxes now feed directly into and match transactions at the AR level, and that's happening pretty consistently throughout the month. We're still kind of tweaking it, like when we start, we're still learning about when we can close the previous month's AR, report it, and reopen. And we talked a little bit about the fact that it's not day one. So we're going through this process now. So yes, the banks are, from a US perspective, those are all integrated. For some of our international businesses, which are much smaller, it's still more of a manual integration at this point, but we have the kind of capability to bring that data in, but it doesn't come in via a lockbox. It comes through a normal sort of international flows. But the other sort of systems, so that's kind of where the reconciliation is happening. You've also now got, because we are on the GL, so you've now got your GL to AR reconciliation. That's much more standardized because it's all inside Oracle now. So
Oracle does have an out-of-box capability which provides you, it gives you a capability to reconcile between your AR and GL, and plus you have a FCCS coming in middle, what Verisk has it, right? That helps into reconciliation between what is into P&L and your balance sheet reporting versus what is there in GL. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really use the AR's lockbox, the true lockbox, but they use Apple to do some parsing rule sets and, for example, for the reconciliation. So is that
It is considered as an external system, right? So the ingestion process, right, what Apple provides, right, it gets into your, again, the infrastructure layer, which is the OIC layer, and that's where you kind of get into the AR side.
So that's very broad.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have other external systems, so like our FX rates and all that, those are coming through. We have treasury management systems as well. Yeah, we also, I think here, that's kind of interesting, when we think about how do you maintain integrity in your customer data master, we're validating our information against D&B, and so we use that as a kind of our, kind of like the gold source for financial customer reporting is CDM and Oracle, but we keep our customer master aligned to D&B, and that gives us the ability to kind of cross-reference between how D&B sees a customer and how we treat that customer. Not always quite the same, but we've always got that external reference point. And then from like a tax perspective, we use Vertex to validate what the tax rate is if we're providing that service to this state, this product. So that's a pretty complex mapping as well that we had to go through.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything else?
Did you not think about implementing like risk management? Because you mentioned SOD.
Right. So GRC was one of the component, right? But yeah, so there were a couple of things, right? What we thought of initially implementing, right? How do you create a SOD between the reportings, right? So instead of going deep in the root where you have a more technology dependency, right, and you have more maintenance to take care, right? We emphasize more onto the process change, right? On how do you bifurcate? Let's say, for example, one of the billing unit wanted to see their own revenue data, right? So instead of blocking everything, right, through the risk control, right, we created a separate mechanism, a separate process control for them. And that's how we kind of save some time, at the same time open some, future roadmap for them to integrate.
And Oracle being Oracle, we talked a lot about RMCS, which is the revenue management piece. In the other part of the project, we also implemented RMCS, but the risk management module. So when we're talking about SODs, we are getting SOD reports coming out of RMCS, but that's more on the sort of, the more general GL, procure to pay. We're getting all of those, and that's where, right here, right now, because it's our quarter close, we're going through all of those SOD, report deficiencies and mitigating controls. We're going through those with our external auditors and our internal auditors. So and one of the things that we talked about governance and we talked about our sponsor group. The other thing that we did was this is all being overseen and reported out to our audit committee. And so like once a quarter, we sit down with the audit committee. And particularly as we kind of go live, they want to understand what the impact of all of these changes are across the broader program on things like our SOX controls, and they want confirmation from internal audit, and they want confirmation from the external audit. So we've taken, we've really thought about each one of those stakeholder groups and how we want to manage them through the entire program. But I wish.
You mentioned about different business entities operating within the US. They wanted to have to see their own data separately. So do you have to have separate views for each one of them in Oracle, or is it all under the same?
The billing unit definition for Verisk is very different, right? Think of like it's a horizontal and vertically connected systems, right? So let's say there can be 5 companies which you have acquired, right? They are known as the billing units, right? So there are 5 different companies operating independently, connected to a central finance network, which is Oracle. So now entity number 1, which is, let's say, part C, biggest unit, right? They want to have their data completely separated from another entity called Opta, right? They don't want to see each other's data, but they share customer, right? They share product. They share the revenue sometime, right? So that is where the major challenge was, how do you differentiate your system architecture so that you blend system with what it provides out of the box, still fit the requirement.
Is it having one view or like one view within Oracle?
There are multiple. Like so legal entity wise, it was a multiple legal entity, right? So you have US, Canada,
We've got about
9 or 10.
We've got 19 countries set up.
Yeah.
We've got probably like 50 legal entities kind of set up. But what we did in terms of our security model that runs across the entire platform is we're able to get quite granular. And what you'll find is you kind of have to find that sort of that path which is Oracle will allow you to do anything. But you've got to think about what you're going to be capable of maintaining. So our security team, we now have this idea of a legal entity, a line of business, potentially a cost center. But the more complex and granular you make it, the more difficult it's going to be for your security team to maintain it. And then the other thing that goes along with that is it's not just in production. You've got to do that in your test environments. And so, you kind of think about, like learning it whilst you're in dev, in SIT, in your UAT environment. And very quickly, and we were probably running something like 15 or 20 different environments last year with all the different parts of the program that were happening. And our security team, Sumit probably gets the record for like not sleeping. I don't think he slept between September and February. But pretty close behind it was our security team, which was really having to, you get a panic call of like, okay, that's not working. We need to drop that down to a lower environment. And then the security team's like, we need 5 users set up. We need it set up like yesterday. And they're like, well, what are the security rules? Well, we're not quite sure, but like, give them that. And there's like, no, that didn't work. Can you kind of give them? They're learning the system at the same time as we are. And then as you kind of get closer to user acceptance, it's like we want to be testing with the responsibilities that people are going to have when they're in production. So that sort of security model, you really want to think about what's possible in terms of not just of what's technically possible, but what's going to be sustainable for the medium and long term.
Thank you, Charles. I think it's time for us to wrap up. So really appreciate you guys showing up here for this presentation. And feel free to ping us, LinkedIn. Definitely we are here to do more business. So definitely let us know what help you need, what support we need. And Charles and team, we are available for a few, until tomorrow if you have any questions, right? And feel free to let us know. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.